the Senate seems to be clearing up its docket ahead of its annual recess in a few weeks' time. From the passage of the petroleum industry bill to the 895 billion naira supplementary budget and another approval for 6.1 billion foreign borrowings, President Buhari's inbox is getting full by the day, courtesy of the National Assembly. But the question is, would all these additional borrowings and spending help the administration achieve its economic growth targets for 2021 in the face of key variables such as inflation and exchange rate? Paul Alaje, senior economist at SPM Professionals, is here in our Lagos studios for his perspectives. Good to see you again, Paul, on the show. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening.
Thank you so much, Paul. Let's quickly take a break. We'll be right back with you, Paul. Stand by. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time for standing by, everyone. Paul Alaje, senior economist at SPM Professionals. Thank you so much, Paul. All these additional borrowings and spending will help the administration achieve its economic growth targets for 2021. But my question is, what do you make of the passage of the supplementary budget and the foreign loans borrowings, which was approved in the last 48 hours by the Senate?
Ordinarily, when expenditure increases, it is expected that it will impact our economic growth positively. But when you look at the realities and other variables, particularly fundamentals that we have in turbulent time, such as high inflation at 17.9 and exchange rate instability that has moved in the last 5 years from approximately 189 naira to $1 now to about 410 naira to the same dollar. What it means is that even though it appears we are spending more nominally, but in the reality, we're actually spending less. The quality of money we are spending and the impact on the economy is minimal, more than the nominal figure we are putting to it. Now, when you put that side by side with what government is borrowing, first, government is borrowing approximately 6 trillion, which are 6 billion, which have been mentioned in some of the headlines you mentioned earlier. This money is Eurobond. It's going to be foreign loan. The moment we further devalue our currency, because we are going to use naira to pay for the dollar or the euro we have borrowed, then we need to earn more or we need to pay more. I give you an instance. In last quarter, because central bank took the decision to emaciate naira from 360 to over 390, 1 trillion naira was added to our debt profile. As I speak with you, debt stock is approximately 33 trillion naira compared to where it was 6 years ago at 12 trillion. With this new approval, we would have done over 200% in increase, 200% increase in debt. When you look at that in the average, on an average of 6 years, we are talking well over 20% or 30%. The question is, by how much has economy grown? The average economy in the last 6 years has grown by less than 2%. The question is this debt impacting us? When you check the website of Debt Management Office, it reveals that debt to GDP is still manageable at 21%. I agree with them, but the two other conditions that Debt Management Office is not talking about is, one, what is debt service to revenue? Is not in good shape, but the most important one, according to new evidence from economics all around the world, is what is the impact of debt on our economy. The impact of debt on our economy is, number one, that debt is growing far more in multiples of what economic growth is growing. Watch this. It is that same GDP that will pay. Look at Ghana looking at multiplying his tax revenue to 28% from what it was. Nigeria is currently doing less than 10%. So you can have $1 trillion economy, but if revenue such as taxes is not coming from it, for you to be able to spend part of that GDP so that it can help develop the economy or grow the economy, then GDP itself is just nominal. In the real sense, economy talks about real growth, not just nominal growth.
Whether you generate revenue or you borrow, it goes into one form or the other of expenditure. So the idea of a business or running government is to spend and generate revenue. So there's always the expenditure side of the revenue. So here we are, balance this for me, our revenue on one hand, which we generate locally, then there's fast and furious borrowings and how it helps us to balance things moving forward.
Okay, so on one hand, we are generating revenue. This revenue is highly insufficient. And I think that government can do more in generating revenue, because the less and less of revenue you generate, the more and more you need to borrow. Why? Because you need to spend. So because we need to spend, we now need to choose, should we generate revenue that will not further put heavy burden on our economy in future, or we go the easy way by borrowing, and in future we have to pay more. That future is so close to us. When you look at reports shared last year, 2020, Nigeria spent average of 50% of what it generated in revenue to service loans, not to pay back, not to retire, but to service loan. This year or next year may even be more if we continue to reduce the potency of our revenue generation. So the balance here is
expenditure, Paul, respectively, respectfully, please. We'll come back to expenditure. What do we need to do on the expenditure side? Revenue is weak. You said we have a lot more to generate, but we're not generating. So we're incapacitated to have enough revenue generation. Are we also incapacitated in terms of expenditure? Something has to happen in between.
Now, on the other side of expenditure, we need to put more into capital expenditure. Not consumption, not administrative capital expenditure, but real capital expenditure, which is evident in rail, which is evident in power. But the most important of all of these is provision of electricity. That alone will boost our economy significantly, up by over 30% in 10 years. If we don't put this correctly, if we don't spend more in direction of power, rail, and electricity, and we continue to spend money in other areas, the truth is the much needed job will not come, inflation will not reduce, poverty may not reduce, and anytime the economy becomes susceptible to major shock, it could be COVID, it could be Ebola, it could be global oil prices, any fluctuation. If government, particularly those that are leading the affairs of the country in terms of economy and politics, continue to focus more on buying new set of cars, on buying, changing, legislatures, equipment, offices, and so on and so forth, rather than deploying that money to major capital expenditure that the poorest of the poor can impact on. If we like, we can continue to do Ansoma 5,000 naira program. Yeah, they are fine for a level, but what will impact the generality of the population, over 200 million people, is more attention to capital expenditure. And I propose that government should change the formula of 70-30 in favor of recurrent expenditure, to reverse it by putting not less than 70% in capital expenditure. But you know the truth, that means we still have to do 70%, but we need to now do more in capital, perhaps to over 100%, so that we can balance to 70-30. How will that come? It will come when we generate more. Where is the money? The money is available. The new report coming about multi-choice, FRS is saying multi-choice should pay $4.4 billion. You know what that means? Perhaps the money President Buhari and his team is looking for is in the pocket of multi-choice, only if FRS win this by continuing to argue it. So for me, I strongly believe, and I've made presentation on how Nigeria federal government alone can generate between 20 to 22 trillion naira per annum, as against 8 trillion we are looking for in 2021. I strongly believe the money to grow this economy is within this economy, but because we are not doing enough in terms of innovation to bring out revenue to support this economy, and state government can do as high as 50 to 55 trillion naira in revenue in their IGR. If you don't get to the point where we generate this much, forget about development. Even though you may say we will grow at 7%, when we continue to compare ourselves with weak base year, such as 2020, whatever little you do, it will appear as if you have recovered. But when it comes to job, National Bureau of Statistics will still put youth unemployment at over 50%, 53.4%, and general unemployment at 33.3%. That will worry us. These are real issues. How do we ensure that we generate more and we spend less? We spend less on what does not matter, such as consumption, and spend more on what can make us more competitive with the rest of the world, which of course is capital expenditure capital expenditure.
Here we are with a supplementary budget, which is mainly going to support security services and get a small vaccine. I haven't been vaccinated yet, so I'm on the queue, by the way. So I need that vaccine. These are very important governance issues that would need to be addressed. But look at the figure, about 900 billion supplementary budget at the middle of the year. So give me your outlook at this rate in terms of how much money is left for critical funding for the capital expenditure that will help us get the right side growth in GDP that will help us pay back these loans.
Unfortunately, truth be told, most of this money will not stay in Nigeria. National Bureau of Statistics report Q4 on trade report. I remember we had analyzed that on this show before. Over 390 billion naira was spent to import vaccines. Now, the new twist to it is now COVID vaccine, among other things that government is looking at. Now, if you are going to import most of this equipment and vaccines and all of those who want to import, we are taking 3 decisions. Number 1 is to consume, put the injection on body so people become protected, which is fine, which I support. But the second decision we have taken is to further deplete our foreign reserve, because if we don't earn enough dollars, we just have to purchase those things in hard currency. The third, but the most important decision we have made is that we have made jobs more available for countries that are producing vaccines, that are producing military wares, and so on and so forth. It could be uniform, it could be ammunition, it could be arms, etc., etc. The question is, when are we going to start manufacturing? Are we going to start producing vaccines and military supplies in our country? Until we are able to do just that, we will continue to spend more and more money, and we claim it's capital expenditure. They are really, in the real sense of it, not impacting our economy. The impact you get is less than 25%, because when the money leaves the shores of our country,
this is a capital flight.
Yes, capital flight. So it's capital flight, and you know, when you have capital flight, it's not just the capital that has disappeared. Labor works alongside with capital, and the real challenge we have today, evident in NSAS, evident in destruction, evident in all manner of things, is because youth unemployment is 53.4%, not my figures, according to the National Bureau of Statistics. Okay, so how do we improve our research so that pharmacists, doctors, scientists all around Nigeria, we can look at local content? With the support central bank started with 50 million, which I think is small. I think in 5 places about 250 million, and other private sector business community can start supporting research so that Nigeria can start on its own. And rather than looking at Kenya or South Africa as a country that would now supply the rest of Africa with COVID vaccine, then Nigeria can be a country of choice.
Yeah, 50 billion into the virus research and all of that. Well, give me your outlook on the second half of the year. The whole idea is that some government officials have said in recent times we'll spend our way out of recession. So I want to borrow that phrase. So do you think with these loans, the spending plans, we'll be able to spend our way out of the current situation in the final 6 months of this year into a new economic horizon, or get us all better out than where we finished off in 2020?
Well, I think if we take the right decision, potentials are high based on our production possibility frontier. It is evident Nigeria should grow up to about 2.5 to 3.5%. But if we don't take right decisions, we may be within 1 to 2%. It all depends on what policymakers will do, what decision we will make. Inflation is also expected to ease from 17.9% to somewhere around 14 to 16% by the end of the year. But when you look at the average, it may still go back to 16, 17% because of high inflation figures we've had in the first year. So when you look at the average for the whole year, it may be between 14 to 16%. But generally speaking, I'm seeing a better half of the year. But something that remains very important is government must show new energy in fighting insecurity that is driving inflation really high. We must also do something about subsidy. And I've said time and again that we have little time to make decisions whether we want to remove subsidy once and for all, or we want to keep subsidy. But if we must remove subsidy once and for all, then we need to build the fundamental, we need to build the foundation for subsidy removal now, in form of providing Nigeria with several cushion effects so that the poor, and I mean the very poor, government says it wants to protect, will not be vulnerable to the pressure of subsidy removal. If we do that and remove subsidy, then we can have some revenue that we go to capital expenditure that can impact the lives of Nigeria even more. So second half of this year, I'm expecting better performance in terms of the numbers, talking of the fundamentals, inflation, unemployment, GDP growth rate, etc., etc. I'm also expecting that with increase in global oil price over $70 and seems to maintain that figure for now, that foreign reserve with the policy central bank is making, it may be a bit the same. I don't see figure going to 450 at official window. But if we make mistake and put another policy that without being sensitive to what the market is saying, I'm afraid we might need to devalue again. But with the recent presentation from central bank, I am very hopeful that we may remain, the figure may remain around 400 to 420 average in coming period.
Yeah, we've got a few more grounds to cover when we come back. Stand by, everyone. We'll talk about those very naughty issues around exchange rate and inflation. You talked about them earlier, but let's revisit them and how they play into the entire macroeconomic situation we find ourselves.